my fingers on it for a minute.
All right, Skip.
We're just gonna do it that way.
Probably.
You got
After
three
that double
lights.
curve, after that double
Yeah,
curve.
yeah, you have pretty lights up there.
So you're not on Facebook now?
Mm-hmm.
She's live on Facebook, people.
Hmm,
She's live.
we're live?
Yes.
Okay. I guess it's time, if we're live, it's time we get started. Last week, we were setting the stage, and we're still gonna set the stage this week. We are not gonna officially, be called into war. We're not gonna declare war this week, but we're getting close but we're gonna fight. We're gonna fight a lot. This week, as I talked last week, a lot of people didn't understand, and I didn't either until I started studying this in depth, is while the Revolutionary War was going on over on the East Coast, the Indian War was going on this side of the mountains. And a lot of people don't understand that and don't perceive that this country was actually fighting. Well, we weren't a country yet, that the colonies were engaged in literally two wars. And I didn't know where to talk about this little incident or not. I think that I will, so we're gonna go back to the year 1777 for a few minutes. Harrodsburg. A lot of people don't realize that Harrodsburg was our first fort, 1774. We automatically think of Boonesborough. Boonesborough wasn't established until 1775, but James Harrod started Boonesborough in 1774. Boone came in 1775, and Benjamin Logan came in 1775 also with what he at first called St. Asaph's. Today they call it Logan's Ford, but it is how that the town of Stanford got its name. It was called, the Indians called it the Standing Fort. We cannot break it. We were out of gunpowder in 1777. Now, and I know that you all remember this too. It was the winter of the 3 sevens. A bushel of corn cost almost $160 in Kentucky in 1777. They were starving, they were out of ammunition, they were out of food, we were broke. There were 103, mostly men, and I think the 3 may have been women. They had sent all the women and children back. George Rogers Clark, and we've named a lot of things after him, and we think of him as going to Cahokia and Kaskaskia, up in Illinois country and Coppernet, wading ice water and so forth. But in the winter of 1777, in late November, early December, he left and went to Virginia. At the time, we were not even Kentucky County. And if you remember back at these times, which we weren't here, but we know that Richard Henderson did the Transylvania Land Company. He bought Kentucky from the Cherokees at Sycamore Shoals in the Carolinas. Well, can you do that? How can a private citizen come in and buy this much land? We were at that time called Fincastle County, Virginia. So George Rogers Clark and 2 more, they make it to Virginia. And they talked to Patrick Henry, and they said, look, if we can't have 500 pounds of gunpowder, and they didn't mention the quantity of lead, how much. They didn't need that much lead because if they missed, they went out and dug their lead back out of trees or bodies or whatever. After the assault of Boonesborough, the settlers dug over 150 pounds of lead out of the walls of Fort Boonesborough. But we desperately needed the gunpowder. And of course, lawyers have to step in. And he says, well, look at the Constitution. You know, if our framers of the Constitution had been doctors instead of lawyers, we'd probably have free health care and criminals be not lawyers. But I don't know. So he says, I don't know if I can do this or not. Richard Henderson has laid claim to this land, and he asked George Rogers Clark, he said, do you propose to go with the Pennsylvania Land Company, or do you want to go with the state of Virginia? And he says, we want nothing to do with Richard Henderson. We need a government. Richard Henderson's in this for profit and for personal gain, and we don't want to be a part of that. So he says, well, right now, the convention, the House of Burgesses, or the Continental Convention, we just adjourned, and we're not going to meet again for several more days, maybe 2 weeks. Can you hang on? And they, well, we're going to have to. So they did. So they go before the Continental Congress or the House of Burgesses, and they say, this is basically when the Pennsylvania Land Company went belly up, turned turtle, because they said, no, we're going to outlaw this. A private citizen can't come in and buy this land. You are now Kentucky County, Virginia, and we're going to give you the gunpowder. So they gave them 500 pounds of gunpowder, and they made it back. And another thing that I didn't realize, so I really started studying this in depth, because everyone knew what everyone else was doing. We had spies with the Indians had spies with us. They knew we'd gone after the gunpowder, and they tried to intercept it. And George Rogers Clark, and they're still there today. There's 3 islands. There's only one tiny one and 2 big ones in Ohio, near Manchester, Ohio. The islands are still there. They're sanctuaries. They're wildlife sanctuaries now. So they're in a canoe race. They're coming down the river, and they know that the natives, the Indians, are trying to intercept this gunpowder, and they're about to do it. So they stop on the 3 islands, and they hide this gunpowder in 5 different places and take off overlay. And the Indians, they know that. So they're sitting and waiting on it. But eventually this gunpowder makes it to Kentucky, and as I say, the rest is history. Last week we talked a lot about William Henry Harrison. And the more I study about the man, the more I admire him. He was an aristocrat. His father was a signer of the Declaration of Independence. But what I admire about him is he could have stayed on the other side of the mountains and lived a good life. His father wanted him to be a doctor. He wanted to be a soldier, and he turned out to be a good one. He turned out to be a great soldier. He wanted to come to the frontier, which at the time was Kentucky, Tennessee, and Ohio. He went to see George Washington personally, and Washington made him a lieutenant, or first a private. And he wound up being a lieutenant, and he winds up being an aide to General Wayne. So Tecumseh, which we did not talk much about Tecumseh last week, we're going to tonight. And William Henry Harrison played a great, great big part in the War of 1812. Now Tecumseh and Boone and Kent all knew each other. Tecumseh was born in 1768. Boone was born in 1734. Kenton was born in 1755. Now, the night Tecumseh was born, his father, and the Shawnees were the Indian nation was a whole lot like the country of India is today. You were born into literally a caste system. The Shawnees tribe, or the set that Tecumseh was born into, were warriors. They were fighters. They had a set that dealt with government. They had a set that dealt with the hunting. They were a very, very organized society. They had courts. They could sue each other. It's really astounding how that their society paralleled ours. They just did different things. Their biggest sin was called pot vino money, starting gossip among our people. Imagine that. So they were pretty much a gossip-free tribe, and you could actually go into a court system and charge someone. You could charge them with theft, you could be charged with murder, and you could be charged with starting gossip. And in part of their beliefs, they said that our great-grandmother is in the sky knitting a huge net. And when when the time comes for the Great Spirit to call us home, she's gonna lower that net. Those of us that are worthy will climb it and go to a good life, a better life. Kind of scary, really, when you think about it. But the night that Tecumseh was born, a meteor went across the earth. A greenish yellow, the sign of the panther. Well, that was a sign to the Shawnees that this was going to be a great man. And he was. He was an unbelievably great man. His father was Puck-Sinwat. His grandfather, which I can't find a whole lot about, his name was Hardstriker. And I can't find anything about his grandfather being a prophet, but his father was a prophet. His older brother, whose name was Cheek-Sika, was a prophet. And Tecumseh himself was a prophet. Now later on, Tecumseh also had a sister. 3 years after Tecumseh was born, his mother had triplets. Well, the natives were a whole lot different than us. The medicine man of the village came and wanted to put him to death. He said, that is a bad omen. Multiple birth is a bad omen. He said, one or all three of these will bring destruction or disaster to the Shawnee Nation. But Puck-Sinwat's father he was the chief of the warrior seven. He said no. The last triplet that was born was called Rolaway Sika, and he was deformed he was born last. His facial features were distorted. He had a nasal twang. He was not a good person when he grew up. He started drinking alcohol at about the age of 9. He teased, he tormented, he was a bully. He was just not a nice person. But he was Tecumseh's little brother. So people pretty much left him alone. So he was allowed to live. And we're going to learn about this prophecy later on in this story. But Tecumseh, he was 9.5 years old when he went on his first raiding party. He got scared and ran. His older brother, Cheek-Sika, was wounded in that battle, and it terrified him, and he ran and hid, and he came out. Like they were attacking a boat that was coming down the Ohio River, which incensed them all. And they forgave him. They said, you're 9.5 years old. It's okay. Come back. But he never forgave himself, and he vowed that I will never, ever run in battle again. And he didn't. His father died in the battle of Point Pleasant not long after 1777. He predicted his own death. His older brother, Cheek-Sika, they were in Tennessee with the Cherokees getting ready to attack the fort. They were going to attack it the next morning. Cheek-Sika told Tecumseh that night, he said, tomorrow I die. And Tecumseh said, well, you can't go. Just stay here, don't go. He said, no, you don't understand. I'm a warrior. I will go fight. But tomorrow, when the sun does not cast a shadow, I will die from a bullet in the forehead. But if you all will go on and attack the fort, you will be successful. Well, lo and behold, the next day, they get up, they're getting ready to go into battle, and Tecumseh looks over, and there's a sapling that does not cast a shadow. It's high noon. 3 horsemen appear on the cliff. One of somebody points at it. And they said, don't worry about it. They're too far away. They hear a gunshot. That ball catches Cheek-Sika in the head and in the forehead, and he died. Tecumseh goes to him. Well, that's a bad omen to the Shawnees, so they don't go and attack. Had they attacked that village, I'm convinced that they would have won. So we're going to fast forward to Tecumseh is a teenager, he becomes a spy, he's already a great war. He killed his first white man at 11 years old in a raid on the, but what has happened, and we're gonna go up to about 1790. What happens in 1791? We become a state. So Kentucky is on the verge of being a state, but what was Kentucky to the Native Americans that we've heard all our life? That's their hunting ground. Now, we don't really know where the dark and bloody ground, that saying, come from. Many people say the day that Henderson bought Kentucky from the Cherokees, that one of the Cherokee chiefs went over and grabbed his hand and said, you have bought a fine land, but I want you to know that it is under a dark and bloody cloud. And we think maybe cloud turned to ground, but we know that there was a lot of bloodshed in Kentucky. And that was the Indians like their private. We know that 4 ancient people were here, but in the late 1700s and the early 1800s, and even in the early 1700s, Kentucky was a hunting ground. You know, we jokingly, I tell my kids when I taught there at Escon Springs, right across the road was the first fast food restaurant in a sense. If you wanted something to eat, you just went over and sat down with that spring, and it ain't gonna be long, the sun's gonna come by there after the water. You know, because there was a 2-acre field around that spring that was wore down from the buffaloes coming there and drinking and waddling. Highway 68 all the way up through Maysville is a buffalo trail. 89 is a buffalo trail, game trail. I mean, literally, we could have for sure driven our 4-wheelers down. In the day they were that wide. Stamping ground there was a salt leak there that the buffalo would come there in mass to drink, and they would stomp the ground, waiting in line and snow. Hence, that place became known as the stamping ground. So, by 1790, the settlers are pouring down. The Indians had pretty much ceded Kentucky to the white man. All due to somebody showing up with 500 pounds of gunpowder in 1777. We held this state, or the county. We held the county of Kentucky. And the settlers started pouring in. Most of them, they weren't coming overland the way that Boone showed them. And they talk about Boone discovering the Cumberland Gap. Boone did not discover the Cumberland Gap. We knew it was there. They were scared to go through it. There was a trail through it, just like there is today. You can go down there. They put the original trail back. So the Indians started coming over in Kentucky and getting the settlers, stealing horses, just like they carjacked cars in Chicago and your big cities. They were stealing horses. Same difference. You had to have a way to get around. So we decided to punish the Indians. We're going to go up into the Ohio country and punish them. So on July the 9th in 1790, we sent a guy by the name of Josiah Harmer to punish the Indians. He takes 1,133 militia and 328 regulars. Now, where did the militia come from? Kentucky. Again, this is the War of 1812. It just hasn't been declared. So they take off. Well, what they don't tell is that Harmer's not a very good leader. In fact, he's a coward. And the Indians show up. Tecumseh's a spy. He's relaying messages back to Blue Jacket and Chiangola, Blackfish. So they attack Harmer. And he makes his men stand back. He won't let them go out and fight. And it's a disaster. And they're all just tore up. So they retreat back to Fort Washington, which is right near Cincinnati, Ohio. They have 183 dead of the regulars. 183 dead of the militia and 75 regulars. They lost all of their supplies. It's a humiliating defeat. So We're gonna fast forward to 1791, on November the 14th, we come up with another guy by the name of St. Clair. But no one wants to join his army, because they don't like him. He's old, he fought the Revolutionary War, he's fat, he has the gout, he drinks, he's just not a good soldier. Simon Kenton and Boone would sign up with him. So you have people like that won't go fight. They were hoping for 3,000. Well, by November 14th in 1791, when they were getting ready to leave, they had 710 officers and soldiers, 690 drafted militia. Because when we went to Patrick Henry and got the gunpowder, we became part of Virginia. Before, you couldn't draft anyone. So these people, the draft was initiated, and these guys they wanted to go fight. We are the fighting Kentuckians. So he takes off with them. Henry Knox is the Secretary of War. Their supply train doesn't show up. So they were supposed to have left back in like late July. It's November the 14th in Kentucky, about like it is now, or worse. So as they leave, they start building forts, and these guys say, we didn't sign up to be forts. They call themselves Diamond Day Men. So when you're drafted, you get paid $3 a month, dime a day, and they're not happy. Now, behind them, they built Fort Hamilton, Ohio. It got so bad that he had to take the regulars and keep guard over the militia to keep them from literally killing each other and deserting. I mean, you're not a very undisciplined group of, quote, soldiers. But behind this army, within a mile behind this army, are 500 camp followers. Their wives, children, and they were very kind here, unattached women. On the army's heels, he ordered them to go back to Cincinnati. They wouldn't. They needed supplies. They didn't have any food. The troops are on half rations. Well, if your wife is following you, and you're only getting half rations, and you give her half of them, you're on fourth rations. They went and talked to St. Clair and told him this. He said, I don't care. I don't have the rations to give you. So they built another fort at Fort Jefferson, which is on up above Cincinnati, it's right above Hamilton. It's about 25 miles north of Hamilton, Ohio. 300 militia desert during the night. 200 camp followers are left with him. You have 500 people. He sends a regiment after them to arrest the deserters and meet the supply train. So now he's down to 920 troops. And the Indians have runners showing this. So 30 miles north of Fort Jessup, on the slushy banks of the Wabash, it's miserably cold, they're hungry and exhausted. He decides to wait for supplies. And they're tired. And so they say, well, we'll wait till tomorrow to erect fortifications for us to get behind. Wrong thing to do. So what happens then? Blue Jacket orders them to attack. So on the headwaters of the Wabash, you have 920 plights, soldiers and militia. A scout goes out and finds these Indians, and they don't even go wake up St. Clair and tell him because he's grumpy, and they know he's been drinking and his scout's bothering him. Another bad mistake. I mean, it's pitiful. So he ordered a 100-man militia and a 21-man ranger detachment to establish a forward guard. And during the night, they hear sporadic fighting, but no one bothers. That Friday, on a cold gray morning, the advance guard was attacked and retreated immediately, and panic overstruck. It overtook all of them. So, but St. Clair gets up. He can't walk because of his gout. He's literally crawling. He asked someone to find him a horse. And we talked about George Washington. They shoot 4 horses out from underneath him. He doesn't have a scratch on him. But he's up in the middle of this battle, crawling and hobbling, and they'll shoot a horse out from under him. He'll get up and get on another one. I mean, he's trying literally to rally the troops. He's not even wounded, but when the battle's over, he has 8 bullet holes in his clothes. You know, it was almost, you know, and that mystified the Indians. They are so hungry when they're going back, they start butchering and eating their pack horses because they have no food. Out of the 920 men who fought, only 24 returned uninjured. There were 632 killed in action, 264 wounded, plus 200 camp followers. They charged St. Clair with dereliction of duty. And he's literally tried, but men come forward and say, hey, he tried. So he's exonerated. So now how do the Indians feel after this battle's over with? Well, they feel like Superman. You know. And they're ready to go. So they go back into Kentucky and start trying to run the settlers out of Kentucky. The government sending peace in emissaries to them. So we're wanting peace, but I don't think it's going to work. So 1791 rolls around, we become a state, we have a governor, and we find out that from the British, that America is rebuilding its army. We've pushed them to the north, but they find another general, Anthony Wayne, Fort Wayne, Indiana. His named after. That's where he built the fort. His nickname is Mad Anthony. He was very successful in the American Revolution. He was a good soldier. But he was a drinker, a womanizer, he was vain, overweight, and he had gout. And he did not get along with his other officers. And after St. Clair's defeat, there was only 750 officers of men. So the U.S. Congress, now this is when we become a state in 1791, raised $1 million, a little over $1 million, to raise an army of 5,000. The Legion of the United States of America. Hence the American Legion is born. Now, that we have a governor, he orders the Kentuckians to stand down. Well, where is Anthony Wayne going to raise his army? There's not that many people. There ain't 5,000 people in Kentucky. He goes to Fort Pitt, and now they're going to pay you a little more than a dime a day. So they start raising, and they get people to enlist. And this man trains them. I mean, he's a soldier, even though with his other faults. He even caught one of his aides drinking to excess, and he replaced him with William Henry Harrison at Fort Pitt. So now, William Henry Harrison wanted to make it to go into St. Clair's battle. And if he'd made it, he probably wouldn't be here. He got killed probably in that battle. So they take boats, and they go down to Cincinnati. And again, Tecumseh, I mean, they send Tecumseh and a group of spies to Fort Pitt to follow this army all the way down, so they're watching. And they call Mad Anthony Wayne the man that never sleeps. They can't figure him out. He doesn't let his guard down. It doesn't matter how tired you are, you're going to build a fortification. He waits on his supplies, he waits on his ammunition, and they cannot surprise him. Now, a guy by the name of Lord Dorchester, his name is Guy Charlton, and this is 1794. He rails that the Americans are siding with the French and they need to be taught a lesson, and we're going to supply the Indians with food and weapons, and we'll be at war within a year with Britain again. But this didn't happen. Now, 33 months after St. Clair's defeat, the British are starting to be reluctant. The Indians ruse an ambush of the 3,800 men and 1,600 Kentuckians that were traveling. the British tell them, if you attack them and you have trouble, we'll come to your aid, because they're in a fort nearby. But after this war, the Indians sued for peace, which didn't happen. There was a man by the name of William Wales who was educated. He was an Indian. That man by the name that we talked about, Sir William Johnson, sent him to school and got him a very proper education. And he was told, if you make peace, I will leave the tribe. So Harrison promoted him to a captain. So he joins the Americans. We have Indians coming to the American side. We have Americans going to the Indian side. So again, we know everything that's going on. Now, Harrison starts building a big house called Grouseland up near Vincennes, Indiana. Tecumseh again has a vision that says that he's going to drive the whites back across the mountains. He's going to start with 50 tribes. Well, how are we going to know this? Tecumseh says. He tells his Indians, give up alcohol and something else. He says, give up alcohol and fill your pipes with kinnikinnick. Well, kinnikinnick is tobacco, dogwood bark, dogwood leaves, but stop the smoking of the tall green weed that brings strange dreams and weakness. So none of what's happening today is new in this world. So,
But it was legal back then.
but it was legal back then. It was growing everywhere in the Ohio country. So, and at this time, you know, the whites are going crazy again. They're pouring down the Ohio River, but we have, again, from Isaac Shelby, it tells the men to stand down. Do not go into the Ohio country and bother these Indians. Kenton even tries to make a land deal with Tecumseh. Like they all knew each other, like we're talking about. Harrison even fraudulently starts, I'm going to say 80% of these Indians want peace. They don't want to fight. So Harrison is smart. He knows which chiefs to go to, and he starts buying their lands up. And he promises an annuity with the knives and the tomahawks and the gunpowder and so forth. Well, Tecumseh has a vision. Harrison fraudulently buys this land in 1805. After we were the 15th state. Vermont got in before us. So now Ohio's wanting to be a state. They're wanting to bring Ohio as a state where that they'll have a government and they can raise money, they can have their own law. Well, Walway Sika, who is the brother that we talked about, he loses an eye, his right eye, in a hunting accident. Either you've heard two different tales that one of the young kids shot an arrow into the air trying to kill the crow, and it came down and hit him, or his bowstring broke. Anyway, he lost the eye. He was already grotesque looking, and now he has a patch over his eye. And Tecumseh is, as a prophet, he's predicting some things. Now Harrison hears about this, but he doesn't know that Tecumseh is the true prophet, because Tecumseh is prophesying through Walway Sika, the one who makes a loud noise. That's what his name meant in Shawnee. So Tecumseh, Harrison challenges him. He says, if you're a true prophet, why don't you do something? You think you're God? He said, why don't you make the moon stop or the sun stop? The moon to alter its course, the rivers to cease to flow, or why don't you bring a dead man back to life, like our God did? Well, Tecumseh fires back and said, well, you're all's God. He came down to save you all and tried to build trust with you. What'd you do to him? I mean, Tecumseh was very knowledgeable. She nailed him to a cross. Why should I listen to you? I mean, they hate each other. I mean, they're right nose to nose. So, he said, all right, 50 days from now, there will be no clouds in the sky. When the sun is at its highest, at that moment, the Great Spirit will take into her hand the sun and hide it. The dark of the night will cover us, the stars will shine, the birds will go to roost, and the night creatures will awaken beyond all doubt. You will know. Now they call their God Manito. That Manito has sent me. Well, what happens 50 days later? They have an eclipse of the sun. We're going to have one this year in April. And William Henry Harrison in high noon, it's July the 17th in 1806, at high noon, an eclipse of the sun occurs, and Harrison like to lost his mind because he wants to know, how did they know this? We knew it was going to happen. Hell, the white men already had an almanac. We were already tracking things like that. But the Indians, they didn't even have a written language yet. Now, at this time, the British show back up as traders. And here, at this time, we talked last week, is when the British seized the Chesapeake, the ship. So now we're getting closer. We are truly getting closer to the war. So Tecumseh moves his village to the Tippecanoe River, away from Greenville. He meets the General Amherst and is guaranteed food and ammo at some time. He told Harrison he moved Tippecanoe to be closer to him because Tippecanoe, Tecumseh had his village at Greenville, Illinois. And this whole time, Tecumseh has sent runners out telling them he's going to raise this army. And again, a lot of the other Indians and the chiefs, they do not want to go to war. So they literally split with Tecumseh. And he says, I will start my own Indian nation. I don't care. But I'm taking this land back. Because at the Treaty of Greenville and the Treaty of Fort Wayne, Winnemac, a little pudgy chief who had no power, sold land to the United States, which we call the Northwest Territories. And Tecumseh literally almost, he about lost his mind when this happened. And again, Harrison buys 3 million more acres for like $10,000 and $1,000 a year in an annuity. Now, Tecumseh in, I have my hand out here, I want, and I don't know where we can show this on the camera or not. Tecumseh comes in with a bundle of cedar slabs that he has had will always seek. That's a map, Rick. That's the wrong one. Yeah, that's back. With a cedar slab. I've got plenty. Is there any way that we could show this, you think? To the people who are watching on the camera? See if you could do that. Now, this is a cedar slab. It's 13.5 inches long, 2 inches wide at the base, about 1 inch at the top, and it has a rounded. So Tecumseh tells, if any white men show up and want to know what this means, the public meaning is on the left. Now, here's where Tecumseh becomes the true prophet, in a sense. He mentions the earthquake of 1812 and 1801. He first talked about it. You read it from the bottom to the top. And it says, all Indians on both sides of the great river will come in a straight direction. at the speed of light. Bring your weapons. Come from the four corners of the earth. Stop tending your corn, hunting of game, and storing of grain, which is a big, big thing for them to stop doing. We're going to unify. This great sign will be the trembling earth. Now, Tecumseh is actually in, and I have my t-shirt on over here, at New Madrid. He's there. He said, I will stomp my foot against the ground, and the mighty river will run backwards. It will open up. It will swallow the dry land. The wet land will become dry, and the dry land will become wet. Reelfoot Lake. That's how it got to be there. Water jugs will break. This earthquake rang church bells in Boston. It was of that magnitude. All tribes in one movement, we will go to the place of the white man and push them back across the mountains. But with this, he also gave them a bundle of sticks. What I think they were was a slab out of this wood that he'd split like our long matches. They were a small bundle. He said, every moon. They said, well, how are we going to know when it will, when this great sign is getting close? And he said, the small bundle of sticks I give you, throw one away every moon. When you get down to one stick, you break it into 30 pieces and you burn one piece a day. And after that, the sign of the panther will streak across the sky, which was my sign of birth. And then I will stomp my foot against the ground. And lo and behold, a meteor. It wasn't a comet. Some people think it's a comet, but it wasn't. Because comets you can predict. It was a meteor when Tecumseh was born, and it was a meteor at this site. And that's impossible. You have to have some sort of prophetic powers to be able to do that. So after all this, the Indians are coming. They're starting to roll up. He goes to meet Harrison at Grouse Land. He invites him. Tecumseh told Harrison that the treaty was no good, that if he did not destroy the lands, that he would kill the Indians that sold him his land, and if you offer us as presents, I will not take them, because you will say that you have bought another piece of American land. And he lets Harrison know that they are trading with the British and will take powder but not tomahawks yet. Tecumseh loses his temper when he looks at me. Winnie Mac is there. And Tecumseh's looking at him when he says, I'm going to kill the Indians that sold you this land. And it gets to the point that Winnie Mac is so scared, he starts to prime his pistol. He's carrying a pistol. And Harrison remains calm and cool. And he asks Tecumseh, he says, well, you all say you can't own the land. How'd you get it? He says, I hear the Shawnees started out in the South. And they did. They came from Alabama and parts of Georgia. He says, you took this land. You come in here and you took it from the tribes that were already here. But you say you don't own the land. But here you're telling me it's your hunting grounds. I mean, he had him tore up. And Tecumseh lost his cool, pulled his tomahawk out, and he realizes what he's done. And Harrison just kind of sits back across his arm. He says, well, I will deliver your message to my leader. I have no authority to break any treaties or give you any land. So Tecumseh leaves and goes back to his camp. Well, the next morning, he looks up. They say, someone's coming. They're walking down the road. There's only one man. And this takes a set of kahunas to do. It's William Henry Harrison by himself walking into Tecumseh's. But Tecumseh, he barks immediately and says, you know, you'll suffer. No one harms this man. So some way they wind up on a bench, a kind of a long bench together. Harrison sits down about in the middle of it. And Tecumseh goes over and sits down next to him. He gets close to him. Harrison moves over, like we would normally do. And Tecumseh moves over. Harrison scoots over. Tecumseh scoots over. Well, finally, Harrison, after about 3 moves, Harrison's on the end of the bench. Tecumseh looks at him very coolly and says, now you know how we feel when a white man comes and takes our land. And they agree to disagree. They shake hands. And again, Harrison says, I will deliver your message to your great father. And Tecumseh says, my great father is the sun. How you going to do that? He's talking about George Washington, and you know, but they agree to disagree and they split. Now, in November of 1811, when Tecumseh starts going south again, he isn't received well by everyone. Not every Indian jumps on his bandwagon and wants to go to war, because they see what we've already done to the British, and so forth. So he winds up at New Madrid, but before he takes off to deliver these slabs, and he's telling Loalowe Sika to avoid any trouble whatsoever. I don't care what happens. Even if some of our braves die, you do not retaliate. You have to be humble until I get back, because if you don't, you're going to blow this. Well, Loalowe Sika, like many people that are still with us today, gets power hungry. And he gets to thinking, well, maybe Tecumseh isn't just the chief by himself. I have some powers too. So what he does while Tecumseh is down, he's now at New Madrid, or New Madrid, however you want to say it. Some young braves come to him and says, we would like to unify together. And it would be a good sign if us 7 could just go steal some horses. That's all we want to do, just to show that these tribes can work together. And he's already been told, don't do anything stupid. So he tells these 7, okay, go steal some horses. So they go off, they steal the horse piece. Well, that don't work. Because about an hour after they come back into their camp with them horses, the whites show up and want their horses back. Well, they give them their horses back. Well, Loalowe Sika then tells them, I have talked to the Great Spirit. And the Great Spirit says, those are your horses. You can go back and get them if you want. Foolish, stupid. So they not only go back and get them 7 horses, but they steal the 15 horses of the settlers that came to get the 7 horses back. And again, he tells these boys, the Great Spirit's with you. Well, what do the white settlers do? They go tell William Henry Harrison. 3 weeks later, a runner appears and says an army of 1,000 is approaching us here at Tippecanoe, and William Henry Harrison is leading them. They stop and build Fort Harrison, which is now Terre Haute, Indiana. The Indians are 350 of them at Tippecanoe because the others have gone back to their villages. There's only 350. There was 3,000. The prophet tells the warriors that the Great Spirit has told them that they should not fear these white soldiers, that the bullets of the whites will pass through you without harm. Don't worry about it. Well, they tricked Harrison into taking a treaty, but at this time, they told him along the way, Sika. He told them, he said, we're going to pretend that we're going to have a treaty here with William Henry Harrison. And two of you are to get behind him, and when I bring the treaty up, you all are to tomahawk him from behind and kill him. Well, he goes back to his tent, and no one knows what he did while he was in the tent. But he comes back out and says, we have changed. Tonight is going to be a moonless night. We're going to attack at night, which is a no-no for the Indians. This place, the Great Spirit turned that off. It was going to be a dark night.
Father, son did that.
Father, son did that. So he gets the Indians ready about 4 o'clock in the morning and says, we're going to go attack here at night. But remember, the whites' bullets and their bayonets, although they may pierce your body, they won't hurt you. They're going to pass straight through you. And they believe him. So they attack. But again, William Henry Harrison has his troops up. And they're already milling around at 4 o'clock in the morning because he knows it's almost like he has a prophet. So here, they run in and start attacking. And the whites start shooting. And at dawn, there's dead Indians laying everywhere. The Americans have 168 casualties. They have 62 dead. 38 Indians are killed. They leave the village, and the Battle of Tippecanoe. Remember the saying, Tippecanoe and Tyler too? When William Henry Harrison was running for president, Tyler was going to be his vice president. This put Harrison on the map, destroying the prophet's town of Tippecanoe. They left the village. The Battle of Tippecanoe was over. They burned the village and equipment and 5,000 bushel of corn and beans.
Now the white men did this?
Yes.
So that the Indians couldn't get a hold of it.
It was theirs. They'd already stored it in the village. That's what they were going to eat for the winter.
Okay.
To survive on. So they destroyed everything they had. So it's 7 o'clock, and this is the point that I had. So we are not yet declared war. Next week we can finish in an hour, I'm pretty sure. So we're going to have the Battle of River Raisin next week, the Battle of the Thames, and the Battle of New Orleans. And we're going to actually declare war and end war next week.
The Father, Son has spoken.
The Father, Son has spoken. Again, I hope I've never done this before, and I've enjoyed researching this. It's taken me, I've learned a lot. But next week, I think I can get a good copy. I told you all last week of the forts. I will find a better copy of all of the forts. They didn't all exist at the same time. But you'll see, and I've traveled this area extensively, and because I have Kim folks up here. Yes, sir. Did you have a question?
No question.
I have a question.
That's what. Yes, sir.
How do we know this much detail? Were there journals?
Yes.
Okay.
And I will give you I don't care, next week, a lot of this came from Albert Hickory, the frontiersman, and then he wrote, and I don't think I brought both of them. I'll bring them all next week. Tecumseh, a sorrow in my heart. You can see it's about 700 pages.
Well, I'm not interested in reading it, but
Right, I
when
know.
you talk about this detail and sitting in the
But from
bench
journals.
and moving and stuff, and I think, how do you know this stuff that's over 200 years old? Yeah.
Well, that's how, and that's how I know from reading this, when they built that fort, he has detail, he has page upon page, and it's actually like reading two books in one. his footnotes are all numbered, and that's how I knew that Terre Haute, Indiana, and Fort Hamilton is Hamilton, Ohio. Fort Washington was right by Cincinnati, and I can't remember who, Cincinnati was called Rosatieville at one time, of all things.
Oh, what was it?
Across from the mouth of the Licking. The Licking River comes out
Yeah.
right across from Covington. So the first name for Cincinnati was Rosatieville, and one of the soldiers, Cincinnatus was a Greek or a Roman, he was one of the two. I'll find out, I'll research it a little more. But they went to Cincinnati, he was plowing his fields, and they said, look, we've got to have you. He had retired from fighting. They said, we've got an uprising, we need someone to quell it. And he said, well, I can't do it, I'm plowing my fields, I'm through with this. And they said, no, we can't do this without you. So he went with them and conquered whatever they wanted, and within a matter of, he was back in time to plant his crops. So there, among military people, there is an order of Cincinnatus, which is a very, very prestigious fraternity to be in. But if you look, a lot of our counties are named after people that died in the War of 1812. Washington, there's Washington right up by Maysville. You have.
Well, there was a Mount Washington in Cincinnati.
There's Washington down on the Salt River. It's like Lexington.
Yeah.
How did Lexington become Lexington? They were a group of long hunters set at McConnell Springs. Simon Kent was one of them. Another hunter comes in, he said, boys, we're at war. Lexington Green, they fired the first shot. And one of them said, as soon as this war is over, I'm gonna come back and we'll start a town right here and name it Lexington. And he did. Richmond, Virginia, Bristol, Kingsport. It was the King's Port on the Holston River. Estill County, James Estill, never lived here, never owned land here. Joseph Proctor. One of my accomplishments, Joseph Proctor was one of the first settlers here. He named Estill County because he served under James Estill at Boonesboro. And when they built the new bypass, it was my last year teaching social studies before I went to central office. We were studying the legislative process, and my class sent a request for our senator or our representative to put a bill in to name the bypass, the Proctor bypass, so we followed that bill through the legislative process. That's how because there's nothing in Estill County named for Proctor, and we wanted to do that. William Irvin, he was at Boonesboro. He had a brother, Chris, that was at Fort Pitt.
There was Fort Pitt in Pittsburgh? Okay.
But it was Duquesne. It was Fort Duquesne until the French and Indian
That
War.
was the French and Indian, yeah, okay.
The French had it. And we went up, took it away from them and named it Fort Pitt. It became Pittsburgh. I mean, it's interesting. It's social studies. Are we through? Supposed to be through 10 minutes, 7 minutes ago.